Hey friends, this is going to be a different video than I usually do. I've sort of always had this guiding mantra for the channel that we're not going to produce video content that doesn't also include actual photography. I think that helps us stay grounded on what's really important, and I'm not typically one for gear rants, and you may have noticed that I'm in my bathrobe. That is because tonight, as I was trying to sleep, I just felt this compelling need to talk about some things that I have had on my mind, and I found that this apparel was befitting the circumstances. So, what is this topic that I feel this sudden urgent need to discuss with you? It's Fuji as a camera manufacturer when juxtaposed against so many other brands like Sony, in specific Sony, and the Fuji X-Pro 3 as a jumping off point for my thoughts. So you've been warned, if you don't geek out on camera talk, this probably isn't for you. And I have a convenient exit for you, by the way. I've linked to a much more exciting video that I just watched by photographer Borut Pederlin and his recent project capturing the work of a costume designer on wet plate palladium. I thoroughly enjoyed that. It's better than this. Go watch it. But for those of you still here and want to talk about Fuji, I want to get real with you. I do love Fuji, I'll say that first, but not as a starstruck fanboy. While Fuji is the primary camera brand we stick with year after year, it's not due to some sort of sense of loyalty or obligation. If another camera manufacturer started building products that worked better for the way that I shoot, I guarantee I'd drop Fuji faster than you can say Kanekairo Yoshida. And in fact, I have tried many times. If it was simply a spec versus spec decision, Lumix and Sony have made cameras that match what we need to a much higher degree, and that's probably who we would have chosen. And if you've watched the channel for a while, you will have seen that we flirted extensively with those two brands. Even Nikon and Canon as well. We always have some sort of Canon device kicking around. We can't. So why Fuji? And I guess a more important question and a more relevant one to you, who is Fuji for? When Sony continues to mop the floor with every other brand when it comes to features that most prosumers seem to be clamoring for. After years of using Sony and Fuji gear and speaking with thousands of users of each system, I really believe the single most important difference when it comes to someone who will love shooting Sony versus someone who will love shooting Fuji is the question of the value between maximum flexibility versus creative constraint and artistic freedom. Deep topic, I guess. Let me unpack it. As a YouTuber, it's always been a bit hard to watch Sony get all this social media attention by reaching out to every channel with a decent following willing to shoot Sony and invite them out to extravagant parties every time they have something to talk about. And not in the hard way that you would think. I'm not holding my breath for an invite. It's hard that in the sense that Fuji won't do it so they don't garner the same attention. And for us, there's a line in the sand. We're much further on the Fuji side of things, and it's a little frustrating to see no engagement from Fuji on those marketing fronts. Moreover, Sony loves to deliver features that YouTubers are demanding. Their furiously fast release cycles always seem a step behind, just right behind what people are saying needs to be improved. They have this singular obsession with delivering on whatever the loudest voice is saying they need to do next. But again, conversely, Fuji doesn't do that. And here's where we bring in the recently announced Fuji X-Pro 3 as an example. At that Fuji summit where it was announced, it became apparent very quickly that Toshihisa Iida, who's the general manager for marketing for Fuji, cares a great deal about what the Fuji X photographers think. They kept referring back to a night of drinking that led to some concepts of the Fuji X-Pro 3. If, on the other hand, he was listening to what people are saying on YouTube all the time, I think we'd long since had a full-frame camera with IBIS, a flippy screen, larger battery capacity, that sort of thing. But Fuji has always kept us social media weirdos at an arm's length, and we're certainly not the ones that they listen to when it comes to what features they want to do next. Now, as much as that frustrates me, because I would love to have some influence, and I would also love to have early access to gear, I totally respect Fuji for that. It paints a clear picture of Fuji's values as a camera manufacturer, and that is creating products for their archetypical user as symbolized by the Fuji X photographers, what they value and use. In other words, artists and professionals first when it comes to innovation. Consumers' needs come into play where it's convenient within those parameters. And then you see those innovations trickle down to every conceivable dollar range for all the different types of consumer cameras below that. It's an oversimplification, but I hope it paints a picture, a bit of a picture of the contrasting approaches between those two companies, and it totally comes out in the design of their cameras. The evolution of the X-T2 to the X-T3 is an excellent example, I think. With the release of the X-T2, I think that Fuji was surprised by the number of people that were impressed by the video capabilities it had, and that garnered a lot of attention, a lot of sales that Fuji never had before with video prosumer market. So with the X-T3, they doubled down on that, and I think it paid off in a big way. But I have this hunch that it was never their primary goal to set out to build a mirrorless video camera that would beat the Sony A7 lineup. So as I said to begin with, this idea of ultimate flexibility versus creative constraints and freedom, for many prosumers, they aren't driven to purchase based on what they need. They are driven to purchase based on what they don't want to not have. That fear of missing out on something that will give them an edge over someone else. When you hitch your wagon to Sony, you have that comforting knowledge that no matter what innovation occurs, you're not only going to get that innovation probably, but you're also going to get it first. And that's comforting when everyone is a photographer and you think you need every single advantage you can to stay ahead, to get that tooling to the point where it's a leg up. A Sony camera is going to look good on a spec sheet. That's what it's all about. It's how it reads, what its capabilities are. That's what sells for them. But Fuji is far more about the experience of shooting. Look at the announcement of the X-Pro 3, for example. This camera is going to have a lot of consumers scratching their collective head. They are not going to get what this is all about. Why would you ever limit yourself like that? Covering the LCD, are you insane? Optical viewfinder and without access to all those electric readouts. Film profiles defined before post-production. Why would you ever limit yourself to a few types of color philosophies when if you shoot raw, you get ultimate flexibility later anyway? These consumers are not going to understand the X-Pro 3, and I love that Fuji can say, meh, we're going to build cameras that appeal to a different crowd. And who is that crowd? It's the folks who get creative constraints and who aren't bothered to push the boundaries of specs. These people have long understood that imposing constraints when it comes to tooling frees your mind to focus on artistry. It's going to appeal to photographers who can come into a project with intent beforehand to get in camera what they knew they wanted ahead of time and not figure it all out later in a vacuum of dials and absolute maximum dynamic range. To be clear, there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting ultimate flexibility and preferring Sony. What I'm trying to do here is paint a picture of why that divide feels so wide at times, why some folks on either side of that spectrum do not have any patience for those on the other. But having said all that, there's always been one thing that's troubled me about Fuji and that feels inconsistent, and that is the question of build quality. I fell in love with the X-T2 when it came out, but the X-T2 had major issues. We still have it. DENAE is actually in California right now with our youngest daughter, capturing some Disneyland magic, but there's one thing wrong with it that I think will probably be the last. It'll be the death sentence for that camera. It's been in the shop twice already, so this would be the third. I've already bought that camera twice with the amount of time it's been in the shop. And the other thing is that it hasn't been a good experience every time it was in the repair shop. Fuji's repair service needs some work, unfortunately, and for a company who seems so interested in building products for craftsmen, it's troubled me that the quality of their cameras has not been up to par. So far, the X-T3 has done better than the X-T2 did, and we're hard on it. I shoot almost every single day with the X-T3, and it shows in the wear. At times, it feels like an extension of my body, but I have to say, I don't think it'll last forever. It was troubling that part of the assembly was moved to China to cut down on costs, and some of the materials just don't feel as premium as some other brands. But then Fuji announced the Titanium X-Pro 3, and I literally felt giddy. Fuji, that is exactly what we need from your flagship pro cameras. If you want to appeal to professionals, to craftsmen, those top cameras need to survive literally war zones. They can't have cheap plastic flaps and magnesium alloy scratchable surfaces. And absolutely, the flip down screen. Yes, so much yes. As an event photographer and a wannabe street and documentary photographer, I know that most of the time that LCD is turned off. I don't want that thing glowing at me and distracting others. I don't want to review those photos till I'm back at my computer. except a very important time, and that's when I need to get low or shoot from the hip, which is actually very often. That is the only reason why I never bought the X-Pro 2, and a significant reason why I dislike the X100 series. And as far as the motion of bringing that down, I love that it's one step now. With the X-T3, you had to pull that out and then kind of flip it up. It was a little bit fiddly. With this, the only time I really need that screen to do that waist level, that low shot, drop it down, it's there for you. And then the rest of the time, it's being protected. You're not gonna scratch that surface. The details you need are given to you on that back and that little LCD viewfinder. It's brilliant. This X-Pro 3 checks off the boxes so hard, and I will absolutely be buying one, no question, take my money. So anyway, those are my thoughts. For those of you on the maximum flexibility side of things, I hope this has helped you understand why the X-Pro 3 appeals to many. And for those of you more on the creative constraint end, you are not a better person just because you have things figured out ahead of time. In short, remember, kindness before cameras. We'll talk to you again real soon.